Hello and welcome to my show Conversation with Priya. I'm your host Priya Mishra, and today we have a very special guest, Tim Mifsud. He is actually been working in a banking space for a long time, and the topic we chose today, which is very much in his interest, is how people are actually differentiating between specialist and generalist. This topic was never discussed on my channel ever before. So this is going to be a very interesting chapter. I would like you to help me to welcome Mr. Tim Mifsud. Hi, Tim. Welcome to my show. Thank you for accepting my request.
No, well, it's good to be here, Priya. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So it is going to be a very interesting communication. This topic was never discussed before in my channel. So really, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sure my audience is going to love it. Very unique topic you have brought up. So before we jump into the original topic which we were thinking, but I would like to ask your journey. What's your journey and how did you started all that whole consulting mindset and entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess it would start really fundamentally from a lesson that I learned from my father. He said that they would provide. I was fortunate enough; they would provide for anything that I needed. School shoes, books, uniform, whatever. But if I wanted something, I had to work for it. So
Right.
video game or bike or whatever.
For
So
sure.
this instilled in me this idea that I had to go work for exchange of, income and get what I wanted, as an aspirational kid growing up in Western Sydney. So I started work in high school at McDonald's, actually, and I became a manager of the store before my 18th birthday.
Right.
And after that, I wanted to pursue a banking career, finance, and my father was in financial planner actually, and so I guess I got a little bit from that as well. But I started in mortgage broking, and a lot of stories around there. But I guess post GFC, a lot of changes, transitions. I was still quite young, and I ended up in retail banking.
Right.
And then so from the retail banking space, doing what I knew, lending, I was managing the store as a relief, and I had this goal to do a private banking job. I wanted to provide that personalized service, and I wanted to do what I thought at the time was, a premium or pinnacle of banking. And so it was a very purposeful approach to my banking career. Once I was in the private banking space, I was started at the bottom, ground up, and then when I got to the management position, they gave me, the underperforming portfolio. There was no support of marketing, and it was a challenger brand on the east coast of Australia, and it was a real hit the ground, wear out the shoe leather type of a work.
Right.
You had to really have a plan. It didn't matter if it was a good plan or a great plan. You had to be consistent,
Right.
And I learned from that job quite a few things about myself. But one of the other important things about my career at that private client manager job was I had an assessment of all of these different industries, all these different professions.
Right.
And my assessment of that was, there was a self-employed kind of bucket who were quite affluent if they were successful. There was the people leaders as well, who generally for corporates and so on, who were also, again, quite affluent by way of wage. And then there was a specialist job in my portfolio. And so this was my sample size of the assessment that I did of how I built my career.
Right.
At the time, I thought I didn't have the backing to become self-employed. I couldn't just jump straight off. I've done some brokering and things in the past, and I got to where I was. I didn't want to do that again. So I was currently a specialist, and in my assessment of my sample, the specialists weren't as affluent as the people leaders.
Right.
And so this was my primary reason for driving my career to leadership, because I wanted from back to that root of that fundamental of, you know, working for what you want. And at that time, I was single, nearly single. I was just got rid of the unit, so no mortgage, you know, and it was, how am I going to accumulate wealth to set up my personal
Right. Right.
life? And that was the decision that I made at that time. And so, yeah, it kind of took me from private banking through to third-party leadership. So third-party in banking space, you would know, is broker, mortgage broker, third-party.
Right.
And so I was BDMing, exceeded all of the expectations there, won lots of awards internally. Then I went to sales leadership and coaching and influencing self-employed mortgage broking businesses. So from there, went to estate management. And that was a really diverse role. So, you know, I had some of the franchise owners, business owners, who I felt like I was learning from, but I could then also see where I could add value, you know, come back to that consistency of putting in a business plan, meeting the business plan, all these sorts of things. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I saw people in business that really were hemorrhaging money. You know, they had other supportive income supporting this loss-making broker business, and they couldn't quite make it successful. And so I got this really broad view of that market in that segment. The reason I transitioned actually back into banking, into mutual banking, was one of my leaders and mentors actually had a conversation, you know, where he needed some help, and he knew what I could bring to the table, and he felt that I could apply, you know, my own experiences, but also grow in this role. And I took this previous position in the mutual banking sector where it was retail banking distribution. I always had two jobs when I was at the bank. So, you know, I was there for branches and I had mobile given to me as a surrogate. And then after I handed the mobiles off, you know, improved process improvement and so on and so forth, I then had the business development team. And then the bank went through some restructure. The business development team was gone. The mobile lending team was well looked after. I still had all the branches, and I then pitched this idea of relationship management. So I built a relationship management team. And then I guess if I fast forward to my most recent role there, which was the general manager of customer and delivery. And this was the business transformation, digital transformation, you know, end to end, everything that the bank was doing in terms of how it engaged with its customers and how the staff serve the customers. All of that technology was changing. Like it was an amazing experience to be part of. And I, you know, got through a good chunk of it, set up the next sort of phase, and built up my succession and moved on after that. So
yeah, I mean, that's where we connected, like, you know, your journey of digital transformation, you know, that's where actually connected us, and find like a passion for the same area of interest. So that was very interesting to know your journey. And what I'm noticing throughout your journey, you were very specific about, you know, going with the flow, one, but at the same time, you being very consistent and being available and open-minded for anything, everything is thrown on in your own expertise area for sure. So that brings to my next communication. Do you think that it's a major part of your contributor, being more open, being more adaptive, you know, being more consistent, available, that brings you more success? Or would you have been more picky and conservative, would have been given you a different path?
Yeah, absolutely good question. And I guess what I think back to, this is really the topic of the day about this specialist versus generalist, right?
Yeah.
Because for me, I would put myself in the generalist bucket, and that I've made that my success. And so some of the decisions and some of the reasons why I've gone down that path, firstly, I'm naturally curious. Secondly, I'm very analytical in the sense that I will research something that I don't know. I am happy being uncomfortable. And in
Right.
those states of like not comfortable, I will actually research and seek out the information to actually gain that sense of comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, these are the two things that really underpin the reasons why I've become who I am today in my working career. And then as a
Right.
generalist, I guess it's never not saying no. You know, one of my greatest success stories was actually a hot potato that if I really could have closed off or been quite narrow-minded and shut down quickly. In fact,
Right.
my first thoughts were, will this work? You know, and anyway. So to answer your question, I think definitely applying or feeding a natural curiosity, which I had. I guess if you don't have that natural curiosity, you'd have to fundamentally understand yourself and understand what would drive you to be open to new ideas or receptive to new ideas. For
Mm.
me, that part was easy.
Mm.
What I had to work for, so it wasn't natural for me, was actually working at it because, you know, as a generalist, I get put into positions where I'm not an expert in my field or I'm not a subject matter expert. And I have to use the tools that I have available to me to actually perform in those situations.
Right. And do you think like being a journalist actually, or being a curious person actually very important to, and it leads to your journalist point of view, but actually it leads you to the different kind of a journey and the experience you get, you know, the value you get from the life. And do you think it gives you more fulfillment on that sense?
Uh, I would say yes and no, actually. So sorry, option C probably wasn't given me the choice, but I'll take it down this road anyway. And the reason for that is uh, on the surface, yes, you're going to be put in lots of very different, varied positions, different situations and circumstances. And so from a fulfillment point of view, you're going to have quite a broad experience.
Yeah.
Not to say you can't get that from specializing in deep diving, of course,
Right.
but I think with this natural curiosity and being receptive to new ideas, you have the options and the broad options that you can then find fulfillment or gain fulfillment from. The reason I say no is because a lot of the satisfaction that I have from work and the
Mm.
fulfillment that I get, it actually all seems to be from the same thing, you
Right.
know, or the same two things. And one is actually at the core is helping others. So as
Mm.
a lender, direct with
Yeah.
customers, I really enjoyed helping somebody secure their finance. And that was
Yeah.
a really simple example of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a leader, you know, and as a transformation leader, we
Yeah.
deliver a project, and I play a key role in delivering a project, and I'm helping a mass segment of customer base at the same time. So that is
Mm.
really fulfilling, satisfying for me. And the other part of that is actually the development of others. So also, and you know what that satisfaction. So that's the helping people and the leadership
Mm.
piece that I'm getting that from everything that I do, agnostic
Right.
to the industry or the idea. You know, that's not relevant totally. However, the yes part of the answer is if I'm not open to all those ideas, I'm not going to get that rich fulfillment and all that varied
Right.
option for
Right.
sure.
And being like, I'm going towards more leadership now because you've been a leader for, you know, and you have been led so many people in your career path. Being a leader, do you think that if anybody as a generalized person will come, do they get more chance to explore given the current work culture, or they struggle?
Yeah, great question. And you're right. I've led some really diverse teams. I have been in retail distribution, leadership, you know, sales leadership, self-employed, mentoring, coaching, and digital leadership. So web
Yeah.
developers, graduates. Yeah, so
Yeah.
quite diverse, right? Project management and what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I generally have a values-based approach to my leadership, and that's just to the core of who I am. One of the rules that I have personally is FaceTime. Before FaceTime was a thing. And what I mean by that is actually how much time are you giving that person face to face?
Right. Yeah.
It's a mantra that I carried forward from my sales days, and really putting into your people. You know, this is
people
a
first
groundbreaking,
policy.
you know, original idea, right? This is quite well known, but using that time, FaceTime, with my team to understand them personally, understand their goals and their drivers. So again, coming down to the fundamentals. And if they're a specialist, fantastic, and they enjoy specialization, and that is what they want to do, and that is where they want their career to go, then you can drive them that way. And if you've got a generalist in front of you that, you know, sometimes I've worked with people that don't actually have their goals, they don't have a clear path. And this is almost too good to work with, because spending the time with them to understand some of the fundamentals of their drivers, you can put a path in front of them for development that can take them in different directions. And I guess from my own experience, they can gain fulfillment from learning something new. So I can help that, or utilize that generalist in a way, whether it's they're existing in a team, recruiting them into the team, or building a team from scratch. But I can use that generalist in a way that's going to help me and my team achieve our business goals.
Right.
But also frame it in a way for them that they're going to get that fulfillment. And what's really important is the follow through and then checking back in with them afterwards. So if you put someone down a path who didn't have a clear goal of where they wanted to go, provided that you knew that they were going to get something fundamentally from that.
Right.
If you don't check in with them to make sure that they're still getting that satisfaction, the
right.
generalist, you know, they might look like they're going to lose interest, or they might get bored, or they might be unchallenged, because the challenge you put in front of them could be too hard and they give up, or it's not enough and they give up.
Yeah. And I have like, you know, of course, specialists get more chance when they are actually first coming to the job. Like, you know, when any job profile you look for, like, you know, can that person do a particular job, or these 3 particular subtasks on it, right? But when it comes to the actual workforce, I mean, people say being an entrepreneur, you have to be like multiple hat, you need to know everything and all those things. But I believe when I was in a corporate days as well, there were so many tasks I have done, which was that was not my, you know, job description, right? And we just took it because it's just that we wanted to genuinely help each other. We wanted to genuinely look after each other as a team overall, because deliverables were more important than actual who does what, you know. And that's what helped me during my leadership time. That was my helpful element to gain some trust amongst the team members, you know. So you know, and that helps. And do I call myself journalist, or do I call myself a specialist? When it is needed, I just did it. When it was, you know, when I needed to, you know, apply for a job, or I have a particular expectation set, like, you know, we are looking for an expert. I was a subject matter expert in banking fraud area, right? So that gave me a lot of thinking time. And being a curious person, I'm always exploring. It doesn't mean I am actually always changing. And I am in a general stereotype mindset. If you are a generalized person, then people think that you are not stable, or you are not thinking, you know, that consistency is not there. But that's not true. You just want to explore other option, in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good point that you make, because on face value, I use the resume as a really good example for this. You know, you've got one resume where you've got an individual person who has been in the same company, even, or different companies, but the same job title. Always.
Yeah.
Right? True specialist, hardcore. Then you've got another resume next to you, and they've done maybe 2 years of that job title, which is what you're recruiting for. And then before that, different, before that, different, before that, different.
Yeah.
Okay. And, you know, if it was a computer making the decision, well, who's the best person for this job? Well, that computer's going to go, to the specialist, because the computer goes, well, what's the
Go
experience
by the
that you have?
keywords.
Yeah, right. Keywords, filters it out. This person gets the interview. But I think what's important is that, it's not someone, you can be a generalist who carries forward the research, the learning, the curiosities, the things that you've already mentioned, some of the stuff that I touched on before. And
Yeah.
you can actually upskill yourself to a point in a short space of time. And so then I call that maybe a career accelerator, someone
Right.
who's actually achieved a point of proficiency
Mm.
and moved to another challenge or moved to another thing. Now, that person's not a bad hire. I think that person, in my opinion, is potentially better hire. From a design point of view, and from some of the learnings we get from humanity-centered design, we understand that if you've got a broad understanding of the user,
Right.
that from a broad experience, a background of your own experiences, you will be able to apply your proficient knowledge in a better way. So
Yeah.
that, I guess, proficiency is the key. If I started a job yesterday in, I don't know, in marketing, it's never something that I've done before, but I've got some small experience. I'm not going to be the expert. I'm not going to be the specialist, but I'm also not going to be proficient. If I spend enough time at it, I do a lot of self-based research. I do a lot of, papers and reading and things like that. So I'm out there going to upskill myself to be able to apply value. And then because of the broad experience, you can then actually draw on other knowledge that you can relate to that same role. And I think the candidate, I would give them that opportunity to understand the same thing.
Right. And that actually pops up a question for me, like being a leader, would you hire more specialists in your team, or you will hire more journalists in your team?
Yeah, well, it depends on how big my team is, I suppose. If it was small, so you go back to that sort of startup entrepreneur mentality. You're wearing many hats. If you've got 3 people and your budget's for 3 people and you're one of them, you definitely need some generalists,
Yeah.
You're going to have to compete in a world against the specialist, but you need to compete against a multidisciplined. So if you don't have the generalists in your team, I think you will struggle. But you need to know what you don't know in that sense.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you've got limited resource.
Mm.
Maybe it's you and a founded partner, and there's just 2 of you, and you're really good at one thing or 2 things.
Yeah.
You have to get external.
Yeah.
If I had the luxury of having a wider team, I would have a combination. The specialist will take you somewhere that you will never get with the generalist in some cases on specific things. I think a solution architect, right? I don't know many generalists who will be able to build a multi-cloud platform with, specific security requirements, geo-locked to Australia, data center or something. Very specialist, but the generalist needs to be able to understand at least some foundation in that specialist field to have the conversation to make that connection. IT, resource, you've also got some experience in IT, you understand. They don't necessarily able to articulate their value or what they do to the rest of the business. Having a business relationship manager as a conduit to those specialists is a valuable asset to business, which is often overlooked, right? So if I had very limited oversight, resource, I should say, I would go for the generalist every day. If I was if I had my sport for choice, I would have a combination. I don't think I would ever have a team direct of specialists only. So to answer your question, in a very simple form, I think the generalist for me will trump the specialist.
Right. And as you said, it is very specific to the job as well. But being there is like a technical manager, if I'll say in an IT text, right? So technical manager, I would prefer if they are looking for more specialized, and within that specialized area, there is some journalism, wrapper would be fine. But being a project manager, you have to understand entire delivery size, right? So you have to actually be able to work with the different kind of people. If you are only a specialist, you might not be able to understand other in any project delivery. There are so many tasks involved in it, so you have to have that journalist attitude, to be able to understand each and every individual. If you remember olden days, I mean, there were 50 to 200 people in a team, right, to deliver one big banking project or any such capacity high profile corporate project. They require that kind of a people, and if you have people like that, then you need to make sure that there is a journalism, definitely involved in it. But when I was like you mentioned, the architect point of view, yeah, they need a very specific subject matter expert, because it's very hard to comprehend and go deep detail in a particular area. That brings to my next question, actually. If you will be starting today as a consulting, and you would be liking to go, you'll go as a journalist or you'll go as a specialist?
Well, I think, look, from my own experience, you need to have some proposition, right?
Yeah.
As a business owner, or as a small business or independent person, if you don't have a target market or a target segment or a purpose, it's very difficult to apply all your efforts. So if I think back to the time working with the franchise brokers, and they could be financial planner, they could be a mortgage broker, they could be business mentor, and inherently the best ones that I saw in performance had a specialist of each under the same umbrella.
Right.
But I guess from my own learnings is that if I specialized in a certain specific area for a self-employed independent, then I would likely gain more work in that specific area. You could tailor your marketing, you could scale it up a little easier, and you could sell, I guess, the vision or yourself as a provider of service. As a generalist, and if you looked at my LinkedIn today, you'd see this exactly the same. It just says consultant.
Right.
What do you do? Yeah. Well, how do you do it? When do you do it? What are you trying? This is an extreme example, right?
Right.
But in the context of being self-employed or a startup business, right? This individual person is a startup business, has founded a company. They've got a great idea or a platform or both, and that idea does one thing. Within that business, they have to do everything. And so they are a generalist, but the business that they have created and founded is specialized in nature.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Maybe it's a case that one can't live without the other.
Yeah.
And the context is very important of how are you applying this in life? Are you a generalist overall? For me, what that means is, I have a natural curiosity, which I feed. I have a follow through in my and commitment on what I do. And I'm comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I will research, self-driven research for things that I don't understand. Okay, so I definitely am multidisciplined and feel that this is a generalist. Okay, put that label on.
Yeah. You can brand yourself in that sense, but yeah. I mean, you have to also come up to that, where do you become a thought leader as well? Like, which area you want to go.
Well, that's right. And just by nature of the conversation, and my experience, we've become, or we're putting out there in the world, I guess, some thought leadership around this generalist versus specialist. And at this point, I'm very pro-generalist. You talk to someone in a different conversation and you have them who has a history of being specialized, it's going to have that different approach and that different lean, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but look at our career path. We have been always in a banking space and financially, that is one of a specialization in that. We didn't go and jump in different industry and all. We stick to that, and then we find our generalized approach into that particular industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And that's that lens you look through, right? Or that context, are you talking about the task you do today? Are you talking about the career that you have? the company that you work for. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also it's also cultural context. If you go to the different culture, I work with the multicultural companies, and of course, I worked in a couple of other countries as well. My personal approach, personal understanding is like Australia is very much specific to that where you specialize, where do you fit in. Whereas if you go to country like India, and I'm not generalizing, just my observation, country like India, people look for more generalized people. People want multitasker. People want can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? So when I was applying in my back in olden days, when I applying for the job, I was more looked for, oh, she knows banking. She knows, this finance area. She understands the IT. I mean, perfect combination. She can be a domain expert in banking IT sector, right?
Yeah.
That's how I was looked. But when I applied here, my first interview, the guy asked me that, why did you do MBA in finance when you are working in IT? I'm thinking, because I'm designing a solution for a bank. Yes, a tool I'm using, a software and IT and platform and all. But what am I doing? I'm working for a banking area. So I'm a domain expert in banking using my IT technology. So height is two different things for me. For me, it was like, okay, I wanted to become a domain expert here and I'm using IT as a tool, but it was differently seen here, right? So
Yep.
it's just my personal experience, but I found people, okay, so if you are doing in a IT area, you should have done your MBA in IT. Whereas I'm thinking, no, I wanted to become a domain expert, bringing my IT knowledge and using that as a tool to facilitate.
Yeah, exactly right. And this whole landscape is changing, as you know. Some of the conversation we're having, off camera, I guess you could say, is how this next generation coming up, with so much internet and chat GTP and information at your fingertips, it's like we can all become some generalist in some degree. And so the value that we as individuals add is going to actually perhaps become more specialized in nature. Or if I come back to one of the notions that I provided before, was that proficiency. You can get a surface level understanding very quickly. And even myself and your story about research or education, is you can be trained or educated or do research in a certain field to have an understanding. And then the proficiency is going to come after you've applied that understanding and the application of that in different settings. So yeah, correct. A banking finance industry is a very broad, and large industry within Australia or globally, of course. And within those different ecosystems, which you would call a bank, you've got technology teams that are some of the best in the country. Like some of our biggest banks claim themselves to be technology platforms now for banks now.
Right.
And this isn't a new concept, of course. This has been years this is happening. So
Yeah.
again, what this will be in the next decade or few years to come, it will change.
Yeah, I mean, and look at now. I mean, that time I was questioned, and to be honest, but look at now. There's so many fusion tech industries are coming. So do you not need a domain expert with the technology knowledge now, right? Fintech, biotech, nanotech, edge tech, agri-tech, right? EDU tech, like everywhere, the tech is a facilitator, right? But still you are working in a agriculture industry and the health industry and the bio industry, right? But technology is a facilitator, which I saw a long time ago coming, right? But I was like, I'm just saying that it's a cultural understanding. It took a while for people to, and I am still thinking that it's still people are not adoptive in that sense,
No, you're right, Priya. I think maybe you're ahead of your time as well. But this is this new age, and I am doing some contract work in business transformation, but I don't see digital transformation anymore. I actually am promoting myself as a digital accelerator, because everybody now has got that technology somewhere in their business. It's been embedded or it's been adopted, or they've got the technology there, and now they need to use it in a more proficient, efficient, productive way to actually use it, take advantage of it. And so if you had that specialist mindset, then let's go right to the left field here and say, I am a bank, I do bank accounts, and I work with money, transactions, and checks. If I am not thinking a generalized view of, what does technology do? How does technology enable what I do? How does this offering of service, and bank is just an example, right, which we both have experience in. If I don't let this generalized view sort of creep in to my staff, my employees, my frameworks, then I get left behind. So a very obvious example, most of the banks, if not all of them now, have done something with technology. And so we're beyond that sort of narrow-minded, pigeonholed view, largely. Back on a smaller scale, if you've got a small entrepreneurial business, you're going out on your own, you've got the idea that you want to do something and lean, and start your own business. If you haven't done that research into the things that you don't know that your competitors do, then you're starting behind that eight ball. If you understand what everyone else is doing, what your competitors are doing, how you differ, all of this basic sort of business planning type stuff. If you actually have that broader understanding, then you're a step ahead of some of those.
Sure. And I mean, that's what it is, that enabler concept. You become enabler and then you become accelerator, right? So first you become, when you started your whole digital concept, is like more of enabling towards digitalization. And now we are actually accelerating because almost everybody got the, like if you are actually doing right now on the current era, you have to be digitalized, right? I mean, I do marketing, as you know. And now also, when I talk to people talk about like marketing, or do you do digital media? Like the moment I say marketing, they said, oh, you do digital media marketing. And I'm like, yes, it's a tool I used. Again, the same concept, right? Technology I use as a banking domain enabler, right? Now I am actually using digital media as a marketing tool for me. Yes, I have to use it. I can't avoid it in current era. But that's not what whatsoever is a marketing defines, It's marketing is ever went beyond to that. And yes, it's an enabler again. And eventually I have to accelerate in that space. And that's where all this podcast and YouTube concept and all, it becomes accelerator more than the social media context.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And thinking about you and your business, you've got a team behind you, and each of those team will have a specific function in your business.
For sure.
But yeah, for sure, right? But your understanding of their roles, like you would have a proficient understanding of all the things that they're doing for you, right?
Yeah.
So again, as a business owner, entrepreneur, as a leader, okay, you have that generalist understanding of your team specializations. Which is, again, if I think back to answering that initial question of the yes and no, you've got to be. You're wearing the multiple hats. And I feel as a business leader within a large organization, large corporate with a team under you, or as a business owner who's actually built a business from ground up, it's the same set of skills. It's the multiple hats, it's the generalist view. And that's why I guess I wanted to have a chat about it today.
Great. And it was amazing chatting with you. So people, I'm sure, must be very curious to know more about you. So how they can find you?
Look, my LinkedIn is probably the best way. Contact details are up to date. I'm often on there and reading the short little articles and blogs. So LinkedIn is definitely the easiest way to find me.
Sure. And all your details will be given below the description, so people can reach out to you. And I'm sure for the audience, stay hungry, look for curiously everywhere so that you can find more and more information. Information is the power. So stay hungry, stay curious, and we will have another conversation next time. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining in today. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful chat.
Pleasure. And audience, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our vision to others as well.